The core debates about our time focus on the issue of equality, and equality is a central theme in Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Now, equality is also the central principle of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Our equality of rights comes out of that. And Tocqueville says right at the beginning of his great work, during my stay in the United States, nothing struck me more forcibly than the general equality of condition among the people. Now, what does Tocqueville mean by equality of condition? Does he mean that in America you don't have rich and poor? You don't have fast and slow? You don't have smart and dull? Not at all. He's not talking about that. He's actually talking about social equality, equality of a very profound sense, the idea that you don't have anything like superior or inferior people. People in that sense are equal in being the same. Here's a clip from the movie America that highlights this point. Listen.
Tocqueville observed how no one bows or scrapes before another in America. America is the only country where we call the waiter sir, as if he were a knight.
So there you go. They're all in the restaurant, and it's all types of people. Tocqueville isn't interested in homogenizing them, but his point is they're all equal in being there, in being arm to arm with each other. Now, he gives an example where he talks about an aristocrat in France, Madame de Sévigné, and she is talking about a peasant who is executed. And she describes it, she's actually laughing as she describes it, Tocqueville says, which shows, according to Tocqueville, that, quote, Madame de Sévigné did not clearly conceive what it was to suffer when one was not a gentleman. So, from the point of view of this aristocrat, there are two types of human beings. There are the superior types, like her, and there are the inferior types whose lives don't matter. But Tocqueville says it's not like that in America. In America, in fact, he says you don't have peasants, you have farmers. But farmer implies a dignity that the peasant doesn't have, because peasant is always contrasted with some other higher superior being. Tocqueville also says in America there are employees, but there are no servants. Now I'm very struck by this fact. I mean, in many countries in the world, if a rich guy were to go into a slum in Bombay and say to the poor guy, hey, listen, I'll give you 100 rupees if you kiss my feet, the guy would be like, great, I'll do it for 10. But in America, you can't do this. Bill Gates can't come to you and say, hey, listen, I'll give you $50 if you kiss my feet. You'll be like, take a hike. You might be richer than me, Bill Gates, but you're not better than me. This is what Tocqueville is getting at. Tocqueville then turns the issue of equality to the issue of men and women, and he has very striking things to say. He says men and women are equal, but they have completely different paths in life. What he calls two clearly distinct lines of action, two pathways. And he goes, it doesn't matter if families are rich or poor. In the rich families and in the poor families, the man is sort of the man of the external world. The man commands the outside space of the house, and the woman rules the roost. And he says, this may seem like some sort of oppression, but he goes, that's not the case. He goes, this opinion, which you could call patriarchy or the division of labor, the division of roles, he goes, is not peculiar to one sex and contested by the other. I have never observed that the women of America consider conjugal authority, male authority, as a usurpation of their rights, or that they thought themselves degraded by submitting to it. It appeared to me, on the contrary, they attach a sort of pride to the voluntary surrender of their own will. So now the key word here is voluntary, because Tocqueville's point is that unlike in Europe, where marriages are largely arranged, in America, not just that the couple decides, but he points out slyly, the woman decides. He says the man is attracted to the woman, but the woman chooses the man that she wants to be married to. But once she chooses, he says, she submits to male authority. And in fact, he describes in a very poignant way the life of the pioneer wife. I want to read a couple of lines because it's a hard life. He goes, the pioneer's wife plucked from the innocent cradle of her youth in an instant and with no hope of returning has exchanged the attractions of society and the pleasures of her own home for the isolation of the forests. Privation, suffering, and boredom have affected her vulnerable constitution, but have not felled her courage. Amid the profound sadness depicted upon her delicate features, we discern a religious resignation, a deep peace, and some kind of quiet and natural determination which confronts the tribulations of life without fear and with acceptance. So you can see here that Tocqueville actually admires what can almost be called the manly determination and manly courage of the American woman. He says this. He says that women, in a sense, have the delicate features of women. They have the ornate clothing of women, but they have the hearts of men. And they need it because in the forest, you may say, while building a new settlement, it takes tremendous determination and courage. You have to sort of submit your life to it. Finally, Tocqueville talks a little bit about books. And he goes, Americans are equal in books. You know why? Because they don't have any. He goes, by and large, all the books have to come from London. But he goes, Americans, even ordinary Americans, aspire to read. He goes, there's hardly a pioneer's hut that does not contain a few odd volumes of Shakespeare. I remember I read the feudal drama of Henry V for the first time in a log cabin. So Tocqueville's point is Americans want to learn, they want to read. Now, when Tocqueville talks about equality, we should be really clear, he's talking about the equality of whites. He's not talking about, he recognizes completely that this equality is not extended to what he calls the red man or the black man. Later, Tocqueville will do, and I'll talk about it, in what he calls the essay on the three races of America. And we'll get to that. But here what Tocqueville is saying is that at least among whites, and at least in principle, you have this idea that no human being is superior or inferior. This is what he means by the idea of equality. And I think we have it in America today. This is the equality that we should be concerned about. The idea that every human being has dignity. We're equal in that respect. We're not equal in other respects. And so the left's manic desire to produce other forms of equality, I think Tocqueville would have recognized as a perversion and ultimately not a form of justice, but a form of using the slogan of equality to promote social injustice.